You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Well, hey there, y'all. This is Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 102 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Y'all, I have my very favorite cocktail in my hands right now, and I'm dying to take a sip. But I'm not going to do that alone. Join me. Grab a glass, fill it up, raise it up, and let's say cheers. Oh yeah, there it is. Y'all, today I'm drinking a sazerac. It is the official cocktail of Louisiana, and I can't think of a more fitting complement to today's episode. A sazerac is either made with cognac or rye whiskey. Take a wild guess which one I'm drinking. And then it's got a little bit of absinthe, bitters, and sugar in it. That's it. But I'll tell you, this cocktail is incredible. I've always kind of likened drinking a sazerac to reading Hemingway for the first time. It's conflicting, yet incredibly engrossing. It's definitely not an easy drink. Your first sip is going to be crazy spicy, very herby. But by the second and third, you're going to find this complex sort of sweetness to it. It'll rise and fall, and the flavors just become more ingrained and more natural, and you're going to find that it's amazing. A lot of y'all have asked me what it is that I love about New Orleans, and I have to say, it's that complexity. This city is full of endless dimension, and my guy and I are seconds away from heading on out to the French Quarter. So in honor of our little New Orleans getaway, I thought it would only be fitting to share some of my very favorite stories about this place. And to kick things off, it's a man named Paxton. He truly epitomizes what makes New Orleans so magical and so special. He's become something of our own living legend. And I have to say this story, well, it's one of my favorites. It's from episode 42 of the podcast, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So my guy and I are finally back in town after our jaunt in New Orleans, and as promised, I have stories. I think that's what I love most about New Orleans, and I'm going to say this over and over again. It's just the perfect place to be. Everything there has a story. And what I especially love is that in New Orleans, people put equal importance on the living and the dead. For example, one of our favorite restaurants is called Muriel's. It's located in Jackson Square. Amazing Creole food. Really, really great. And they have the best turtle soup in all of New Orleans, in my personal opinion. But here, let me give you a little bit of background about their actual establishment. The building was originally built in the 1700s, and it burned down in like 1788 or so, and the land was purchased by this man named Pierre-Antoine Lepardie-Jourdain. Say that like 500 times fast. That is a mouthful. But what he did was build his dream home on this land. Now, unfortunately, Pierre was also a gambler, so he lost his dream home in 1814 in a poker game. And he was so distraught by this, he commits suicide in the building. Now, eventually, the land changed hand a couple of times. Things were built. But the original portion of the building still stands, I believe. So out of respect for the original landowner, they keep a table reserved for him. And every day, they put out bread and a glass of wine for him. Now, my guy and I have our own sort of spirit that we pay tribute to in New Orleans. His name is not Pierre. His name is Paxton. We first met Paxton, I think about 5 years ago. Now, my guy and I had, up to that point, been to New Orleans a couple of times, but we hadn't really ventured too far out of the quarter. So on this particular trip, we decided that we were going to go into the Marigny to Frenchmen Street. Now, Frenchmen Street is incredible. It's similar to Bourbon Street in that it's got, several blocks worth of clubs and restaurants. It's very funky, it's very arty, but unlike Bourbon Street, it's definitely more of a locals location. You definitely don't get the same partying, drunken, obnoxious college kid touristy vibe to it. So my guy and I decided to hit it up one morning. I believe it was a Thursday morning, actually, probably about 10 a.m. or so. And we just started walking down the street. Now, unlike Bourbon Street, Frenchman Street probably doesn't start to wake up until the early afternoon or so. Not that we knew this at the time. We just started walking down the street and we're checking things out. And as we hit the far end of Frenchman, we made a right turn. And we stumbled into a bar called Igor's Checkpoint Charlie's. The only way I can describe this bar to you is that it is a dive. And by a dive, I mean, think of the most dark, dirty, depraved bar that Charles Bukowski would set himself up in, and then set it on fire. And you will have Igor's Checkpoint Charlie's. It's also a laundromat. And I believe on Tuesday evenings, you can also get your haircut there. Unfortunately, that means at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, it was open and waiting for my guy and I. Now, every bar in New Orleans, whether it's in the Quarter, whether it's on Frenchman Street, or anywhere else, really, it's soaked in history. The walls of these places have absorbed the sweat, the tears, the booze, the vomit, everything that anybody can dish out. These bars have seen, particularly Checkpoint Charlie's. But it is without a doubt one of my favorite places to drink. There's a pool table in the back. They have a very well-stocked jukebox. There's even a pinball machine in the far back. And the bartenders have very generous hands when it comes to making your cocktails. So my guy and I wander in and we sit down at the bar, and sitting just to my left is a guy who looks exactly like Jason Segel. He was sitting by himself. He had one or two empty cups in front of him and another full one in his hands. And he looked over at us, said hello, and offered to buy us a round of drinks. Well, we're never one to turn down free drinks, of course, so we introduce ourselves and we learned that his name is Paxton. Turns out Paxton was a regular at Checkpoint Charlie's, and he'd been there for a couple of hours. That was really just his routine, we found out. Because here's how things work in New Orleans. When you're sitting down at a bar, the person next to you, out of nowhere, can become your temporary best friend for an afternoon. Really, all it takes is the right shine. Now, I don't know exactly what it was that endeared us to Paxton. Maybe it was just the fact that we were there at the right time, 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning, and he wanted a little bit of company. Maybe we just looked like friendly people. I don't know. But he opened up to us in a way that nobody else in the entire world has ever spoken to us. And over the course of the next 4 hours, Paxton told us the story of his doomed love with Sylvia. Now, I can't vouch for the authenticity of any of his story. All I know is what he told us while we were sitting there. And that's that he fell in love with Sylvia when he was a teenager, and Sylvia loved him back. And it was passionate and tragic all at once because, of course, Sylvia's parents did not approve of Paxton. He wanted to do right by Sylvia, so he decided to enlist in the army, and he went away, leaving her behind. He apparently spent a couple of years in the army. Unfortunately, he was discharged. He didn't tell us why. We didn't ask, because it was really none of our business, and it was up to him what he was going to tell us. And when he came home, of course, he found out that Sylvia had fallen in love with another man. And it was at this point that Paxton reaches into his wallet. And he opens it up and he pulls out a photograph. It's folded in half and he lovingly opens it up so that we can see a photograph of Sylvia. She's got long black hair, blue eyes, a very dainty sort of smile. She really did look like somebody you could easily fall in love with. And he was so proud of this photograph. He treasured it and he just showed it to us because it was his honor. So he picks up his story again, ordering us another round of cocktails, of course, and relates that he tried to make it work with Sylvia. And she tried too, to her credit. She left that guy behind. She tried to make it work with Paxton, but unfortunately, she just couldn't shake her love for that other man, and Paxton couldn't shake his love for Sylvia. He was so broken up about it. He was so brokenhearted that he left his home state and moved to New Orleans. He didn't actually tell us how many years had passed since he last saw Sylvia, but I got the impression that it had been quite a while. But they wrote letters to each other every so often. He didn't have a computer, you see, so he had to write her letters by hand. And in these letters, he would write her song lyrics. He called them lyrics. It was really more like poetry, but he quoted a little bit to us. And I wish to God I could remember it because he was just so passionate about it. Now, of course, another round of cocktails has already gone through us. And at this point, Paxton gets up, he walks over to the jukebox, and he starts playing specific songs for us. And with each song, he calls out certain lyrics that he feels really represent his love to Sylvia. There was a Styx song. I think he played something from Journey. Lots of classic rock. Because Paxton was, above all else, a very classic man. So my guy and I looked down and we realized that a good 4 hours have passed, that we've just been sitting there, drinking with Paxton and hearing the story of his love and his life with Sylvia and how much he missed her. It was heartbreaking, but it was also incredibly romantic, and it was just the perfect way to spend an afternoon in New Orleans. And if we had wanted to, we probably could have stayed there with him all night. Paxton didn't seem all that anxious to go anywhere. And who knows, maybe he didn't even have a home. Maybe he lived at the bar. That's just kind of how people roll in New Orleans. But we had to end our conversation there. We had really learned everything that we were going to learn about Paxton at that time. So we thanked him for talking to us. We thanked him for telling us his story and for buying us drinks. And we said that, we hope one day he can be reunited with the love of his life. We shook hands and then we walked away. Now, Paxton's story kind of hung with us throughout the year. Every so often my guy and I would be sitting down and we'd look at each other and say, I wonder what Paxton is doing right now. I wonder if he and Sylvia ever got back together again. So that next year when we returned to New Orleans, we decided the first thing we needed to do was head to Frenchman Street and sit down at Checkpoint Charlie's. And again, we did it at 10 a.m. on a Thursday because we felt like this was Paxton's time. Now, Paxton wasn't there, unfortunately, but we asked the bartender. We said, hey, do you know Paxton? Has he been in lately? And what do you know? The bartender knows Paxton, and she's got stories to tell us. Turns out, Paxton is a trust fund baby. He has a mansion in New Orleans, and she was at it not too long ago where he was having a party that he invited everybody at Checkpoint Charlie's to. Well, this pleased us tremendously, just knowing that Paxton was still in New Orleans and he seemed to be doing reasonably okay. So we thanked the bartender and we asked her to give our regards to Paxton the next time she saw him. Well, the following year and the year after that, and even this year, we returned to Checkpoint Charlie's every Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning with hopes that we will see Paxton. We have yet to see him, but we always hear more stories about him. One year, everybody was worried about him because it turned out he was doing cocaine. The next year, he was a sugar daddy. And this year, we learned that Paxton had just been in the bar with the beautiful Sylvia. The bartender could not contain her excitement because she too knew the story of his doomed love with Sylvia. Now, she couldn't confirm whether or not they were actually together as a couple, but she said that she was every bit as lovely in person as she was in that bent photograph. And she said that Paxton seemed absolutely delighted to be there. Well, that made our day. So we told the bartender again, please give our regards to Paxton. And this time we left a little bit of something extra. Just enough to buy him and the lovely Sylvia a round of drinks on us. And with that, I'm going to raise up my glass right now, and I'm going to toast to Paxton, who is our living New Orleans spirit. Cheers, Paxton. Y'all, my guy and I are going to go looking for Paxton again on this trip. And I'll tell you, it doesn't even matter whether or not we find him, because truly, he's always there. He is New Orleans. Now, this wouldn't be an episode about New Orleans without telling you about a little bit of trouble my guy and I found. This next clip is from episode 40, and it takes place during an amazingly wacky and crazy event called the Red Dress Run. Oh, now, like I had said earlier, I had hoped to be drinking a Vue Curry cocktail right now because my guy and I are like practically out the door and on our way to New Orleans. I've said it before, I will say it now. New Orleans is my favorite place to go in the United States. It truly is. It's got this amazing combination of culture and history and just so much vibrant energy. I love it. Plus, I mean, it's one of the few places where you can walk down the street carrying your own cocktail. I mean, how satisfying is that? You know, you're hanging out on Frenchman Street, you know, you've got a cocktail and you want to bar hop. You want to see the other bands at every other place. So, you know, you haven't finished one cocktail? No problem. Put it in a to-go cup and walk down the street and go hang out in another bar. It's the best. Now, my guy and I have been to New Orleans. I've completely lost count. I would say maybe 10 times. We try to go at least once every year, and every time we do, we always come back with the most amazing stories. Although sometimes, they don't always necessarily have a happy ending. My guy and I never go to New Orleans when there's some sort of massive event going on. You know, we don't go there during, say, Mardi Gras because it's just one gigantic party. Not that there's anything wrong with Mardi Gras, and I know that there are ways to do it where you're not overwhelmed by swarms of drunken college kids. But we really prefer to go when we can just be in New Orleans and where we can just feel like we belong there. You know, we don't have to battle crowds. You know, we can feel like we're locals, just, you know, without the advantage of the zip code. But this one particular year, we had inadvertently showed up during the Red Dress Run. Now, at its core, the Red Dress Run is actually a charity event, and I believe it benefits women's heart health, but I could be wrong about that. It's a marathon where people all wear red dresses. Everybody, you know, and you do your running, and then you go and you celebrate on Bourbon Street. But as things are in New Orleans, everything is a celebration. So regardless of whether or not you are participating in the race, everybody in the quarter wears a red dress on Red Dress Run Day. Everybody. And it may not even necessarily be a dress. It may be lingerie. It may be a bunch of balloons, you know, taped to your body. Who knows? That's the beauty of New Orleans. I gotta say, my guy and I were not prepared to be the only two people on Bourbon Street that day wearing, blue jeans. It was like the crimson tide down Bourbon. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. Everybody in red. Now, we had met some friends there that day, so, you know, they kind of, helped us out a little bit with some red accessories so we didn't look quite so touristy. Again, you know, Bourbon Street is what it is. I don't necessarily recommend hanging out there that often because it's a little dicey in some areas. In other areas, it's just plain madness. But every so often, you know, you just got to hit it up because it's an experience. And because this was Red Dress Run Day, we had to see what was going on. And we made our way down Bourbon Street. We wound up at the Bourbon Cowboy. So we're hanging out in there, and it's this, like everything, it's dark, it's sticky, it's full of booze, just, you know, it's amazing how much booze you can get. You know, they don't just give you a cocktail. They give you these giant Slurpee-like jugs where they fill it up halfway with bourbon or whatever you're drinking, and then they add a splash of 7-Up to it, and they send you on your way. So we'd had quite a few of these. Everybody there had had quite a few of these. My girlfriend and I were dancing, we're hanging out, you know, we're having a great time. And, you know, we kind of worked our way out of the club and onto the street where everybody is still partying. You know, there's dancing, there's music. So my girlfriend and I were just dancing in the middle of the street, drinking our cocktails. It's amazing and beautiful and just so much fun. Now, of course, in our drunken condition, we were a little bit oblivious to our surroundings, but no big deal. We had our guys with us. We were safe. But apparently, in the Bourbon Cowboy, a fight broke out. A massive brawling fight. And it wasn't limited to the Bourbon Cowboy. It spilled out onto the street, and it spilled out right on top of me. I have never been so quickly and so swiftly knocked off of my feet and onto the ground. And I couldn't get up because I was pinned between these two giant hulking guys who were beating the crap out of each other. And me, I mean, I'm drunk, right? But I'm doing my best to protect my face because even in my drunken condition, I'm like, please just don't hit my pretty face. And I'm curling up. I'm trying to curl up in the fetal position, and I am pinned to Bourbon Street. And I'm in a pool of bourbon water, which isn't actually bourbon at all. No, because none of the streets on Bourbon or really anywhere in the quarter are even. You know, they're full of potholes. They're full of swales. And these swales collect swill. That's the only way I can describe it. It's pretty much every foul liquid from Bourbon Street, and it just gets soaked up into these, swales on the road. So I'm stuck in there. I've got these two guys beating the fuck out of each other on top of me, and I'm trying desperately to protect myself. So my guy, of course, he's not going to let anything happen to me. So he jumps in, and he's trying to pull these guys off of me. And his friend isn't going to let him get in any trouble, so he jumps into the fray too. And now I've got 4 guys all writhing around, beating the crap out of each other on top of me. Well, finally, the bouncers come in, and the police come in, and they're pulling everybody off of each other. And I'm feeling kind of like Corey Haim at the end of Lucas, right? Little old me, wearing my little sundress and, a red bandana in my hair. I finally emerge from the fray, and I stand up, and, the police are hauling the 2 guys off, and, they're kind of dusting my guy and his friend off, and they're asking everybody, are you okay? Do you need any medical attention? And I'm looking down at myself, and I see that my knees are scraped, I'm bleeding, but nothing is broken, my face perfectly intact. Awesome news. And they're like, do you need help? Can we take you to the hospital? And I'm like, nope. But you can get me a shot of bourbon. And the police officers just shake their head, and my guy looks at me, and my girlfriend gives me a hug, and she's like, welcome to New Orleans, sweetheart. And with that, I'm going to have some bourbon. Hang on. Now, let me just say that this is not New Orleans. I mean, obviously things like this happen there, but this is not what I love about New Orleans. Getting into a street fight is definitely not what New Orleans is all about. But it is a little bit of a badge of honor that I wear with pride. Really, New Orleans is just about the culture. And the food. Oh my God, y'all, the food. It is the only place in the world where my guy and I will do a bang bang. Have you ever done this? It is the best. It's so wrong. It's so decadent. Really, all it is just eating 2 dinners right after each other. And it's so easy to do because, you'll have one dinner that you've planned, you'll eat it, it's wonderful, and then you'll walk a couple steps down the road and you'll smell something so incredible and delicious that you just have to go in and eat that too. That's one of the beautiful things about the quarter. Doesn't matter what day of the year it is, anytime you go, you are going to find something new. My guy and I weren't expecting to bump into the red dress run, but I'll tell you, I'm so glad we did, even if I didn't exactly land on my feet. Now, before I wrap things up here, y'all, I just wanted to share one more clip. It's part of the conversation that I had with actor Eric Roberts. This clip didn't make it in our interview, but I wanted to share it because it's a couple of minutes where he and I got to talk a little bit about New Orleans. Just on a personal level, I know you're from the South. I was wondering if you'd spent any time in New Orleans recently.
I'm actually from New Orleans. I spent the first 6.5 years of my life in New Orleans, and then the next 8 years in Atlanta, and then on overseas. We lived on a 112-foot sailboat there, parked at the end of Market Street there in the water. That's where our boat was.
Oh, how spectacular. I love New Orleans. It's my favorite place in the world.
Yeah, mine too. It's also the best food in America.
Without a doubt. I could not agree more. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done in your life. When you go to New Orleans, it stays with you. Well, y'all, I hope you've enjoyed this little taste of one of my favorite places in the whole world. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to go hit Frenchman Street and find Paxton. I can't wait to come back next week and share all of the amazing stories and adventures that we find out here in New Orleans. Until then, y'all, have a great week. Cheers.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.